Here it is, a sign on an electronic billboard that will stay up an entire month.
And then you've got the Gaza Strip. And again, we've gotten used to this idea that there's such a thing as the Gaza Strip, as though there's any legitimacy or any real, real reasoning to it. The Gaza Strip was created as a concentration camp. And as our friend Yusuf al-Jamal says, this concentration camp has recently become a death camp.
Hello, my name is Stanley Heller. Welcome to the Struggle Video News. Here it is, a sign on an electronic billboard that will stay up an entire month. Our group and a number of others rented a billboard where two major Connecticut highways meet to get across the message that we want Israel's endless warfare to end, and we say the way to get that done is by stopping the river of weapons to Israel. If you're in Connecticut, you can see the billboard where I-91 ends and goes into I-95 South. You can't miss the billboard. It's 48 feet wide. Of course, the board will have a rotating message. We're one of 8 messages. The billboard directs people to go to the new website, stoparmingisrael.us. On that site, you'll see links to the groups sponsoring the billboard. We urge you to visit their sites. And this encouraging news, a full-page ad in the New York Times telling the world that many, many Jews don't want the U.S. or Israel to expel Palestinians. The lead signatories are dozens of Jewish actors, artists, and public figures, including Joaquin Phoenix and his siblings Summer and Rain, Ilana Glazer, Eric Andre, Morgan Spector, Tony Kushner, Jonathan Glazer, Larry Charles, Naomi Klein, Peter Beinart, Tavi Gavison, and Wallace Shawn. The public figures are followed by a list of hundreds of rabbis. The roster includes both a who's who of Jewish left-wing activism and the names of prominent liberal pulpit rabbis across the country. We heard about the ad on the Twitter feed of Voices Against War. Here's the feed. It says it's operating in Israel-Palestine. On the feed, they showed a protest in Jerusalem. Marchers chanted, "From Gaza to Jenin, freedom, freedom for Palestine." Brave folks, Israelis with those sentiments are often assaulted by violent Zionists. You didn't see it on national TV, but a producer in the Superbowl halftime show took out a sign with a picture of a Palestinian and Sudanese flag on it and ran around the field displaying it until he was stopped by security. His name is Zulkarnain Nantambu. Police detained him but couldn't find any law that he had broken and let him go. The NFL pompously decided to expel and ban him from any NFL stadium for life. He was interviewed by Al Jazeera. The interviewer asked, "In response to your protest, the NFL says you're banned. Would you still have done it if you knew the risks?" He answered, "The risk of a ban? I was afraid I'd get sniped at by the Secret Service. I can watch football games on television if I choose, sir." Darn straight, the president was in the Super Bowl. Who knows what the Secret Service might do? Much respect to the protester. Now to the Middle East. Sundus Shalabi took her last ride in this car. She was 8 months pregnant. The Israeli paper Haaretz said they interviewed the soldiers involved in her shooting. They said she exited the car and looked at the ground suspiciously. So they shot her dead. We want to present this comment sensitively and accurately. Corporate TV emphasizes any aspect of the poor health of Israeli captives released in Gaza. Indeed, a couple of weeks ago, 3 men did look very thin and gaunt. If that was deliberate, it was criminal. However, several facts have to be mentioned. One is that Israel has tried to deliberately starve all the Palestinians in Gaza. Look how Israelis release captives, head down and handcuffed from behind. And look at the difference between before and after pictures of this man, Ibrahim al-Shwish, and of Bassem Tamimi. All captives have the right to proper treatment, whether they committed terrible crimes or whether they were seized as bargaining chips. Here's an example of Israeli fascist talk that Israeli TV thought was appropriate for a broadcast.
אנחנו צריכים להיות הגיוניים, לא תמיד לדבר פוליטיקה. מה זאת אומרת? בגלל שיש אנשים שאומרים, לא, נגד העסקה. מה נגד העסקה? המלחמה תימשך 5-10 שנים עכשיו. אנחנו לא, הרי זה לא ייגמר פה, אין פה שלום עם אף אחד. עם מי נעשה שלום? עם חמאס? אפשר לעשות אותם הסכמים? אפשר גם לעבוד עליהם קצת, כן? אנחנו יהודים, רוצים להיות ישרים, עושים הסכמים. מה זה, שוויץ? לא. זה אזור רצועת עזה שתולה במחבלים. כל ילד שנולד עכשיו בדקה הזאת הוא מחבל מראש, איך שהוא נולד.
So he says, any child who is born now is already a terrorist from the moment of their birth. Unfortunately, this incitement to murder did not come from an idiot crank. It was tweeted by Nissim Vaturi, Deputy Speaker of the Knesset. On February 11th, groups concerned with pollution and climate held a protest in Hartford. This coalition of climate and energy justice organizations gathered at the Eversource headquarters. 50 participants rallied outside the state's largest electricity provider to hear remarks, march together, and drop a banner and carry signs. Coalition priorities include ensuring Eversource declines participation in Enbridge's expansion efforts, stopping gas expansion, and lowering energy burden for Connecticut's low-income residents. Right now, the expansion effort called Project Maple means larger pipelines and bigger compressor stations. These stations deliberately vent methane gas, which is dangerous for the climate. This little-known fact about venting from compressor stations was explained by Sandra Steingruber, senior scientist at the Science and Environmental Health Network, during a Zoom talk several weeks ago.
And that means we have to stop a build out of any more future build out of the more than 300,000 miles of natural gas transmission pipelines that traverse the United States. Each one of these lines is serviced every 40 to 100 miles by compressor stations. And these pressurize the gas and keep it push it along and keep it moving. These compressor stations also periodically vent climate-killing methane directly into the atmosphere to prevent explosions. So these compressor stations don't leak because there are plumbing problems. They leak by design and by necessity. Otherwise, the whole thing would just blow up. And these not only destabilize our climate system, but represent a terrible menace to the health in our communities where they're located. And again, I'll refer you to our Fracking Science Compendium. There's a whole chapter on pipelines and compressor stations that will present to you all the peer-reviewed science. In a sentence, we're worried about benzene and formaldehyde, which come pouring out of these compressor stations, along with 70 other air pollutants, 39 of which are cancer-causing substances.
Remember that methane gas is 100 times worse as a global warming gas than carbon dioxide. Now more of the talk by Miko Peled at the Palestine Museum. He was talking about how Israeli apartheid works and was just starting to explain its effect on Palestinians.
Palestinian lives are governed by different sets of laws depending on where they live within Palestine. Even within the population of Palestinians that are citizens of the state, of the apartheid state, there are differences. So if they live in the south, in the Naqab, where mostly Palestinian Bedouin live, they live under the governance of an agency called the Agency for the Development of the Negev. You know, they call it the Negev. They call it Naqab Negev. Other Palestinians who have citizenship live under different bureaucracies. The Palestinians in Jerusalem have their own set of laws that they have to deal with, and then you've got the West Bank, what's known as the West Bank. The West Bank, by the way, doesn't exist anymore. There's no such thing as the West Bank. They've named it Judea and Samaria. It's completely integrated into the rest of the country through highways and shopping malls and everything else. But the way they differentiate, the way they describe themselves, is that around the cities and towns within, again, what used to be the West Bank, there's concentrations of alien population. Concentrations of an alien population. So there are about 3.5 million Palestinians living in ghettos, surrounded by cities and towns that were built exclusively for Israeli Jews. So this idea that there is a West Bank is an outdated idea, completely outdated. It was integrated into the rest of the country a long time ago. And then you've got the Gaza Strip. And again, we've gotten used to this idea that there's such a thing as the Gaza Strip, as though there's any legitimacy or any real, real reasoning to it. The Gaza Strip was created as a concentration camp. And as our friend Yusuf al-Jamal says, this concentration camp has recently become a death camp. But the problem is the existence of the Strip. Why is there a Strip? Why is it segregated from the rest of the country? So the apartheid state created these divisions in order to basically keep everybody confused and apply privilege to Israeli Jews throughout the entire country while denying rights to Palestinians. But the bureaucracy is so complicated. So the apartheid report details all of that through research, through interviews, with data. It's an excellent report. And the proper response when when this crime is being perpetrated is demanding sanctions, is demanding divestment, is demanding boycott. And by boycott, I don't just mean, not buying their hummus or not buying their avocados. By boycott, I mean they shouldn't be playing in FIFA. They shouldn't be participating in the Olympics. We need to get serious about this. They should not. We're talking about closing diplomatic missions, not allowing the representatives in any arena to be part of any event. That's what brought down the apartheid state in South Africa. And we have a model. We don't have to reinvent the wheel at all. There are plenty of models of how to do this. So we have to get serious about understanding what we're dealing with. We're not dealing with another Western democracy. We're not dealing with the only Jewish state and all that rhetoric. We're dealing with a brutal apartheid state that has been engaged in genocide. Now, don't take my word for this, for the genocide. Read the definition of the crime of genocide. Raphael Lemkin, a Jewish jurist, a Jewish lawyer, wrote this in 1948, 49. It's very clear. It's very short and it's very clear. Take a look at the definition of the crime of genocide, and you will read a synopsis of what has been happening to Palestinians for the last almost 8 decades. And who is responsible for this crime of genocide, for this genocide? The apartheid state. If we don't end the apartheid state, we will not see an end to the genocide. Now, they stole a country, they destroyed large parts of it, they renamed it, they renamed localities within that country. They're in an ongoing process of destroying monuments and destroying history, denying the identity of the people who live there, denying the identity of the country, of the existence of the people. We have to understand what we're dealing with, and we have to make sure we're laser, our focus is laser sharp on bringing an end to that so that we can end the killing and the genocide, and we can begin talking about what a free Palestine looks like. Until we do that, we're not going to see an end to the suffering of Palestinians. Until we do that, we're not going to see the release of thousands upon thousands of Palestinian prisoners. Until we see that, we will not see a serious conversation about the right of the Palestinians to return. And there needs to be a serious, this is not a bumper sticker. Very often people talk about the right of the Palestinian refugees to return as though it's some kind of a slogan. It's not a slogan. There have to be measures put in place to allow for that to happen. There's not going to be peace in Palestine until the apartheid collapses, brought to its knees, and a real free Palestine, a real democratic Palestine with equal rights is established. That's base camp. And that is the pathway to peace. They present it as, well, we created this thing and you want to destroy it. No. They are engaged in destruction. They are engaged in denying what is happening to Palestinians. They're engaged in denying the existence, never mind the rights, but the existence of the Palestinian people. We're talking about replacing an apartheid regime with a democracy with equal rights, a free democratic Palestine with equal rights. So I think it's important also to negate, to step away from their premise and focus on a positive premise, which is, again, like I said earlier, is the pathway to peace, is the vision for peace. That's what I would say. Yeah.
Miko, I was wondering if you can educate us a bit about the structure of the Israelis themselves. How do you classify them in terms of their understanding of the true history of what happened, their attitude towards Palestinians, the future, etc.? Who are the Israelis with respect to these issues, and how do we get them to move to where you are?
So no easy questions today. Okay. There's a great social media guy, Hamza Saadeh. Maybe some of the younger people here know him. Check out his conversations. He's online on YouTube, on Instagram Live a lot with just Israelis. And you hear some of the conversations. It's hair-raising. He's brilliant, and the people he talks to, he brings the truth out of them in ways that maybe they don't even know. Israelis are a society that was born of a horrific crime. That's what Israeli society is. And so when you're born of a horrific crime, obviously you think that the crime is a great thing. And how you justify the crime, well, it has to do with your own personal perspective. Some people think that Palestinians don't exist. Some people think that maybe they exist, but they should be killed. Some people, whatever, I mean, the range of the discourse in Israeli society, whether it's in the media, whether it's among politicians, whether it's within people, just day-to-day people, is absolutely horrifying. Is absolutely horrifying in its racism and its negation, again, not only of the rights of Palestinians, but the existence of Palestinians and the justification of this sadistic reality that has been part of the life in Gaza, in Gaza, or the Gaza Strip, over the, since October 7th. The justification, the excuses, the way it's framed. And again, I think that's something that we need to be aware of. The way it's always framed is Israel's war with Hamas, the Israel-Hamas war. What does that even mean? What does that even mean, Israel-Hamas war? Israel has been at war. Israel declared war against the Palestinian people almost 8 decades ago and has been consistently massacring and displacing and destroying Palestinian lives for 8 decades. Israel's war with Hamas? This began with Hamas? What are they even talking about? But framing that way presents a possibility that somehow this is justified because, well, Hamas is a terrorist organization and Hamas is this and Hamas. It's absurd. It's absolutely absurd. It's absolutely absurd. But that's how this discussion is that's how the discourse is. That's the discourse that takes place there. And here, by the way, every time you hear anybody talk about it in the news, wherever, in any conversation, that's the framing. Hamas is not the issue. It's never been the issue. The problem is not the resistance to the oppression. The problem is the oppression. The problem is the source of the violence, not the response to the violence. I've been saying this for a while now. I was raised learning about the partisans who fought fascism in Europe and all these great fighters who fought fascism in Spain and in Greece. And in my lifetime, many of our lifetimes, by the way, some people forget, but Spain, Portugal were fascist regimes. Greece was a military dictatorship. And of course, South Africa. But I mean, people forget. And, we learned, of course, the fight against apartheid in South Africa and the fight against dictatorships everywhere. We always, learned about the people the resistance against these regimes as heroes. I never ever heard having to condemn them or denounce them until it came to Palestine. When it comes to Palestine, the expectation is, first of all, you have to condemn them. Condemn them for what? What is it exactly we need to condemn them for? Standing up? Resisting? Demanding freedom? I thought we believed in these things. Where did it come from that we accept that there should be an exception for Palestinians? And people say this all the time. And many people agree with it. Almost every interview I've given a lot since October 7th, has to begin with, do you condemn? Are you out of your minds? Yeah, I condemn. I'll tell you who I can condemn. I condemn the apartheid state that has been engaged in a sadistic type of genocide for almost 8 decades. That's what I condemn. You want me to condemn the people that are subjected to these crimes when they stand up? So again, this is an opportunity but what's going to make it an opportunity is whether we seize it or not, what we do with it. We have to do something with this, and I just want to say one more word about the liberated zones on campuses. I visited several of them, and the display of humanity on those campuses was the most encouraging, optimistic, wonderful thing I've ever seen. I don't know that, this is unbelievable stuff. The way they operated, the way they ran these things, and some of them were huge. And some of them had lasted for a very long time. And they figured it out. And when people from the other side came in to provoke, whatever, the way they were dealt with, in a disciplined, organized way. And what were they calling for? Which I think is extremely important. Across the board. They were calling for sanctions. They were demanding transparency from their campuses, from the universities, and sanctions, which means dismantling apartheid.
Ukraine is in a tight spot after 3 years of Russian invasion. Trump says he'll meet with Putin, and the expectation is that he'll throw Ukraine under the bus. On February 14th, the Ukrainian military service reported that a Russian drone had hit the sarcophagus covering Chornobyl. You heard that right. The covering of the biggest radiation disaster in history has now been compromised. Reuters report that Alexander Titarchuk, the plant's chief engineer, said the barrier, which was supposed to prevent the spread of radioactive substances, has ceased to function according to its design. TSVN would like to know about any protests for Ukraine happening this month of February. Let us know at mail@thestruggle.org. That's our program for today. See us next week at this time. I'm Stanley Heller for The Struggle Video News.